Hello, this is John Boardman and founder and teacher of the group. I'd like to welcome you to another exciting class, and this is for people on the internet and who was unable to attend today for whatever reason. And today in the group, we begin our topic series of prayer, and we will be discussing on that in the next 3 Sundays. Today we begin in an introduction to prayer, and I broke down on what topics we are going to be talking about related to prayer. And the theme of it will be value the power of prayer so we can maximize the influence of others. Value the power of prayer so we can maximize the influence of others. And that is a theme of prayer. Well, when I began today's discussion in the classroom this morning, I asked the class a question. And for them to answer the question, they had to look at the names that I've written on the board. And names that I've written were famous people of the past and present. I wrote down the names of George W. Bush, Oprah Winfrey, Steve Jobs, Adolf Hitler, and Jesus Christ. And I asked them, what are the common things that these people have? And I got different answers, such as they were world changers, they were influential. And the two answers I was looking for was answered. And they were leaders and followers. After they answered with they were leaders and followers, I asked the class, what is their definition of leadership? And there were great definitions. They were talking about leadership was people that they follow. Leaders were people that were influential. And then I gave my definition of what leadership is. And my definition came from John C. Maxwell. And he says that leadership is influential. That's it. Because without people, leaders are people just taking a walk. Now, the important concept of leadership is persuasion. It's the ability of getting people to get them think the way they think, and that is influence. And we are all under the influence, and we are trying to influence others, and those are our two plans of influencing. Well, the power of prayer helps us to influence others, and people that have started groups, they either start really well and they disintegrate, or they never take off. And part of that is the lack of influencing others. Now, for example, I could advertise, hey, there's a Bible study this Saturday, and I can't force people to come because I will be violating the laws by taking people through their free will. And people between now and Saturday, they either can or don't have to go to the Bible study. So they decide not to go to the Bible study. Why? Well, I advertised it, and people may not come to the Bible study because they weren't influenced. They had no reason to go to. And that's a great example on how things in this world, when it comes to influence others, are out of our control. And that's why we need to value the power of prayer to influence others. Now, to begin the introduction, a great example of that was Daniel. Daniel was a great example. And today we look through 3 passages of Daniel. We look through Daniel chapter 1, verses 9 through 20. We looked through Daniel chapter 2, verses 24 through 48. And we read through Daniel chapter 6. Now, through these passages, we could see on how Daniel value the power of prayer to influence others. So we are going to begin to read in Daniel chapter 1, verses 9 through 19. And I will begin. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse likened than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Mesar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our circumstances be looked upon before thee, in the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melchizedek took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now, at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king commanded with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. This is a great way to begin our introduction to prayer and to prove the value of prayer to maximize the influence of others. Now here is what's going on. Daniel and his friends, Meshach, Hananiah, and Azariah, they have been forced out of their homeland of Israel and into Babylon. And what the Babylonians would do when they took their captives, they would take the best of the best and enroll them into the Babylon University to later to be used to be served to king's advisors. And the best of the best got the best things. They got the best clothes, the best meals, and the best wine. However, Daniel, which his name means God's my judge, he did not forget where he came from, and he kept his values, like praying 3 times a day, and he kept following his laws, even if that meant going against King Nebuchadnezzar's laws that was set for him. In the passage I just read, we clearly see that Daniel and his friends refused to not eat the king's meat and the king's wine. Not because it was about the meat nor the wine, but because of what the meat and wine were honoring, which were the Babylonian gods. Well, Daniel and his friends took a big risk to go against the king, and quite possibly it could have cost them their lives. And they were willing to sacrifice that instead of disobeying their God. So when Belshazzar was trying to offer them their fruit, and they refused. And Sarsa was very, very worried because he felt that, hey, if these guys don't eat their portions, not only could they be losing their lives, but he could be losing his life as well. Well, Daniel gave them a challenge. Say, hey, listen, this is what we'll do. For the next 10 days, don't give us the king's meat or the wine. And after 10 days, let's see how we perform and let's see how we look. Well, after 10 days, in scripture it points out that not only did Daniel look better and perform better, they were 10 times way better than the other people that were rolling in Babylonian University. And they gained favor. And that took by Daniel standing upon his principles. And that came through his trusting relationship that he has with God. And that comes through prayer. So there's two things that I want to point out from this passage. Two very important things. In verse 21, prayer lets God influence people to have them favor us. If you look at 21 where it says, and Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. Now, if you look to a time when Daniel was appointed as one of the king's advisors to a time that he served under King Cyrus, that was a long period of time. And throughout that period, because of Daniel was living a life of prayer, he constantly gained favor. And he was able to use that to show God to many leaders during his lifetime. So the first point is prayer lets God influence people to have them favor us. And today we will like that. We will like when we go into getting a new job, we will like the person that's hiring us to have favor over us. I mean, sometimes we even like that when we go and enroll into a university to get a master's or PhD. We hope that administration gains favor over us. And we learn how to through Daniel, and that's through prayer. Prayer influences others to have favor for us. Again, I repeat that. Prayer lets God influence people to have them favor us. Second point, prayer gives our trust over to God so we can allow Him to be in control. Daniel has such a trust in God through prayer, and God was in control. So Daniel gave everything of his life over to Him, and that's what prayer does. So second, prayer gives our trust over to God so we can allow Him to be in control of our circumstances. Now, we see on how in Daniel value the power of prayer so it can maximize the influence of others. Now, throughout the next 3 weeks, for example, next week we're going to talk about prayer being an important task for a spiritual leader. And to help us begin to grasp that a little bit, we're going to go in Daniel chapter 2, verses 24 through 48. And I will begin reading. Therefore, Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained, to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, Destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king. I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judea, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king, and said, The secret which the king hath demanded, cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king? But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king of Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the later days. Thy dream and the visions of thy hand upon the bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter, and he that revealeth secrets make known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes thou shalt make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet of part iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out, without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the shaft of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the heaven hath he given unto thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another, the third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with murky clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with murky clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God shall come to pass thereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretations thereof sure. Then the king of Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth, it is that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets. seeing thou couldst reveal the secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors, over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. That passage right there was about Daniel interpreting King Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue. And that has to do with the end times. But I don't want to focus on that. I want to continue on the topics of prayer. And these are things I want to point out so that we can see on how prayer is the most important task a spiritual leader can take. Now, when trouble arises, people, especially believers, they will pull God out of a shoebox. Or if there's a fire in a building, people will crack the fire extinguisher, get the fire extinguisher out. And that's how sometimes people treat prayer, where prayer should not be treated like that. Daniel has such a habit of prayer that when trouble arises, he did not panic because he has a deep, trusting relationship in God. He knew what to do even when his life was on the line. Him and his friends gathered together in time of prayer, and God revealed a vision to Daniel. And remember in Daniel chapter 1, God promised Daniel that he's going to be the best of the best, and he's going to see things that no other people will see. So we can see that prayer is your most important task a spiritual leader could do. So there are two things that we should see. First is, without prayer, Daniel would not have been revealed what the king's dreams meant. And Daniel not only saved his life, because he saved the lives of others. Because if no one interpreted the king's dream, the king Nebuchadnezzar was going to wipe out the whole entire wise men, and that would include Daniel as well. So without prayer, Daniel would not have been revealed what the king's dream meant. Second thing, and this is found in verse 17 through 20. Prayer is the most important task a spiritual leader can do. And Daniel knew this. That is why, before he did anything else, he started off his day with prayer. And next week we're going to take a look in Mark chapter 1, verses 25 through 35. And we're going to see on how Jesus, like Daniel, began his day with prayer because he knew that was the most important task he could do for his daily schedule. Now, Daniel chapter 6. I'm going to check this real quick. Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6 is a classic Sunday school story, and it has to do with Daniel being thrown into the lion's den. And I will go ahead and read so that we can see in Daniel chapter 6 on how we are too busy and not to pray, and prayer saves time. Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the princes, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither there was any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute, and to make a firm decree that whomso shall ask a petition of any god or any man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Then these men assembled, and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree, that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save O thee, O king, shall be cast into the dens of lions? The king answered and said, The thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not. Then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, near the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. The king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men assembled unto the king, and said unto the king, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is, that no decree nor statute which a king established may be changed. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God whom thou servest, continually he will serve thee. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den. And the king seals it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace, and passed the night fasting, neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning, and went in haste into the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continue able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel, and has shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me, forasmuch before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee. O king, have I done no hurt? Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel out of the den. So Daniel was taken out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives, and lions had the mastery of them, and breaking all their bones in pieces, or they came at the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, Peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree, that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever. In his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his domain shall be given unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth. He worketh signs and wonders in heaven, and in heaven, who had delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persians. Okay. Here are 4 points from Daniel chapter 6. Daniel never let life dictate in his prayer life. Number 1. Prayer allows us to stand against the haters of this world. Verses 4 through 8. All the people in Persia, the Medes and Persians, they were against Daniel because they were jealous that he had favor of the king. So they came up with a way to try to bring him down, which they passed this legislation within 30 days that no man could pray to his God. Well, instead of going along with it, Daniel set a great example whenever trouble rises around us. Daniel went to his house, got up, opened the window, knelt down. He prayed to God, and he started off with praises. And that's how our attitude should be whenever trouble arises. We should always be thankful and joyful. And God honored that. Third thing, prayer saves time. So we are never too busy to pray. In fact, we should pray often. And Daniel prayed often. I'm sure that whether morning, afternoon, or evening, when Daniel said amen, that did not mean he stopped talking to God. He was walking with God constantly. And that's why he has a deep trust and relationship. And no matter what the opposition was, he was not going to defile God because he knew that God was in control and that he is working with God. So we should pray often. Fourth thing, prayer is determining influence for God to prosper through them. Verses 26 through 28. The leaders of Daniel's time, from the Babylonians to Persians and Medes, they had the opportunity to witness the presence of God through Daniel. And that was because Daniel's prayer life. And I'm sure that Daniel daily was praying for people that he was working for. In other words, he was praying for his bosses, and we too should do the same things. Now, there are 5 things to be pointed out that we can learn on how to value prayer to maximize the influence of others. Number 1, pray anywhere and pray often. That's what Daniel did. Second thing, and this is a challenge, for 40 days, pick a certain time and isolated place to pray. So you have a habit praying daily. So when trouble arises, it will be such a habit that where it's just like breathing, that you just do it. And it should not be when trouble arises, then pray. We see a lot of Christians do that, and times God does answer prayer. Yet they treat God like a shoebox. When trouble arises, take him out of the shoebox. When trouble goes away, put him back. And God does not want us to use prayer like that. Now, don't get me wrong. When trouble arises, we should pray. Just like in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel and his friends gathered together when their lives was along the line. But even if God did not let them live, they still trust in God. And that's how we should be as well. Third thing, if you have not spent time in prayer yet, then do it before you do anything else. Fourth thing, do not just pray when you are in a storm, but pray often. And finally, pray often to allow God to maximize the influence of others. Again, I'll repeat that. Pray often to allow God to maximize the influence of others. And again, the theme for this is value the power of prayer so we can maximize the influence of others. And next Sunday, we will look at more on how prayer is the most important task a spiritual leader can do. And we will be studying from Mark chapter 1, verses 28 through 35. And I thank you for watching this video, and I hope this lesson helps you to grow closer to God. And you can stay connected to the group through the group parentheses at TRBC through Facebook. And thank you, and God bless you.